Welcome, everybody. Go ahead and call the meeting to order and start with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Next up is the consent agenda. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion, questions?
Just on the personnel report, Lisa, it looks like everything's, I mean, it's a small one. So we're headed on the right track.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been able this week to fill 3 or 4 key positions that we were really trying to look to fill and start making some transfers and then get new people into positions. So definitely heading in the right direction.
Any more discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries 5-0. With that, we will move Dan, Alicia, and audit report. The floor is yours, Dan.
All right, appreciate it. Would you guys like me to present here or from this chair here? What works better?
Whatever you're comfortable with. You've been here a few times, so.
My name is Dan Coleman, work at Quest CPAs, partner there, did the audit for the school this last year. The reports you'll see dated June 30th, so we're a few months down the year. So we're looking at historical data here, but we'll still be able to learn a few things about this last year and how we performed financially. There's a lot that's involved in the audit, a lot of procedures that we go through, 44 pages of information sitting in front of you. And so we'll try really to keep it brief for you tonight, hit the highlights, and then at the end of the presentation, if you have additional questions, we can go through any other questions or details that you'd like to see. I would like to report that the audit went really well. We appreciate Alicia and all her hard work getting things ready to go. And from what I understand, Cheryl was here for a while throughout the year as well. So we appreciate their hard work. This last year for school districts, it was busy. Your school added 3 new funds. And across the state, we see other schools that added maybe 7 or 8 new funds this last year, mostly due to the COVID money that came out. So busy year for school districts. And then Alicia, of course, transitioning from Notice over here to Middleton, had to get real familiar with that new accounting software that you guys use. So we appreciate her hard work there. Everything checked out okay. I'll mention 3 reports just briefly. 1 through 3 is the auditor's report. That's where I express an opinion on the financial statements. We've issued an unmodified opinion, which is the best that we can give. It means that the financial information is accurate and that the board can rely on that to make decisions. So good job there. Second report, pages 40 and 41. When we come out to do the audit, we take a look at internal controls and compliance items. For example, do we have policies and procedures in place to protect the school's assets? Dual signatures on checks would be one of those controls. A monthly bank statement review is a very common one. And then if a school is missing any of those internal controls, we'll suggest that they implement them. But the school has all the controls that I think we need, and so we're in good shape there. The compliance side of that, we also look at, we follow federal and state law when it comes to the accounting. For example, do we, properly go through the budgeting process? When we publish a budget, have a public hearing, that kind of stuff. Everything checked out there as well, so that report is clean also. And then the third report on pages 42 and 43, if a school spends over $750,000 of federal money, we actually have to do a second audit. So we audit the financial statements to make sure everything's accurate. And then we also do a single audit when a school spends over $750,000. And we look at how that money flows through the school district. That third report is also clean, no issues, so everything checked out okay. To look at the actual finances, we'll turn to page 9. looking at on page 9 is a profit and loss statement for the school. And if you're familiar with school finance, it is broken down between major funds and non-major funds. What you're looking at on page 9 are the school's major funds. And most of the activity flows through these 4 funds. And so we'll look at each one briefly. First column you'll see there is the general fund. I'll point out the 4th number from the bottom, net change in fund balance, $583,800. It's a positive number. So we had an increase in the general fund this last year of $583,000. Very bottom number, ending fund balance, $2,051,246. That's where we ended as of June 30, 21. If we look at those numbers, on average, Middleton spends about $2 million per month. And so that comes out to be about a 1-month operating reserve. Last year, if you recall, I think we had about 3/4 of a month, and it was pretty light. So I recommended that you increase that fund balance in the general fund. So it's come up compared to last year. Our recommendation is 1.5 to 3 months. So we're still a little bit light. I'd like to see it come up a bit if we can do that this next year or the next few years. Our recommendation is just kind of a soft recommendation based on school finance. State payments come out every 1.5 to 3 months to the school. And so you would want to have at least 1.5 of funds on hand, cash flow the school until the next payment comes in from the state. In addition to that, another big deal that you have is federal funds are reimbursement based. So the school pays up front for those federal expenditures and then you get reimbursed later on. So you have to use some of your cash on hand to make that process work. Those are the 2 big reasons why we recommend 1.5 to 3 months. Second column over, child nutrition fund, 4th number from the bottom, net change in fund balance, $184,650. Child nutrition fund did great this last year. Previous years it's had losses, and so we talked about that a little bit. So a big turnaround there in the child nutrition fund. You'll notice 4th number from the bottom there, $22,759. We did transfer in some money to cover some of the employment costs. That is based on state law. So ending fund balance, very bottom there, $184,650. So we're doing really good in the child nutrition fund. Child nutrition fund is interesting. The state would like to see us do well in it, but not too well. They actually have a maximum fund balance that they would like to see there before they ask you that you spend it down. The max for Middleton School District would be $306,000. So we're sitting at 184, so we're in good shape there. 3rd column over, bond fund. We'll just look at the very bottom number there, ending fund balance, $4,987,224. For me, this fund is pretty simple. I just look at the next year's debt payments of $4,144,000, and it's nice to see that we have that in the fund balance to make next year's debt payments. We do, and so I would say we're happy with that. Just point out also this last year, I think we paid down debt of $3.5 million. So we made extra payments on debt in the amount of $3.5 million. So. 4th column over, capital construction fund. Very bottom number there, ending fund balance $514,747. I did notice we had some architectural and professional services there. So I assume the school has a plan to spend that money down. I'm not sure if we need to go into that at all, but I assume in the next year or 2, probably that will be spent down. Yeah. Okay.
Is there a recommendation for a cap on that, or
There's not.
they just don't like to see a balance sitting there?
No, that's okay as well. As long as you guys are in the process of spending it down, that's no issues.
Okay.
Capital constructions funds usually have major projects, and so they take time. Any recommendations that I have, we just mentioned increasing the general fund balance if we can a little bit. You guys are running the supplemental levy, so that will help out preferably. And then the other piece, I guess, to the puzzle is you can look at the budgeting process, make sure that we have a conservative budget to help increase that general fund balance. If you look at me on pages 29 and 34, we'll look at 29. I mentioned that the GASB last year required that we include student funds. additional detail on the student funds in the district's finances. So if you look at page 29, third column over, you see student activity. So we are now including the student funds as a fund in the district's finances. So now we show, this is balance sheet information on page 29. If you look at page 34, I believe. Yep, 34. Third column over, student activity, you now see revenues and expenditures there as well. And so the GASB this last year said, hey, we'd like to see more detail on the student funds, so you guys need to include it as part of the district's finances. So you guys are in compliance with that. And I mentioned at the beginning, you added 3 new funds this last year. That was one of the new funds that you added to student activity.
What does that include? Is that like revenue from ticket sales from games? Is that like fees that students pay for activity cards? It's all of that.
All of that.
Any fundraising that any club does that doesn't go through the booster club, but goes through the girls basketball team if they have a fundraiser.
Yep.
So it's all that kind of money is what we're talking
All the way
about.
down to the elementary schools, you have several different, elementary, middle school, high school, all combined, and it includes all of that. If you did want greater detail on that than what's in the financial statements, at least she could print that for you or help you out with that.
Okay, thank you.
As far as other GASB statements, government accounting standards boards, every year they issue statements, things they'd like to change in the audit report. There is a big change this next year on leases. However, Middleton School District does not have any leases at this time, so I don't think it will affect you. But we'll keep watching those GASB statements as they come out to make sure we comply with everything that they request. But that's all I have for you tonight. I can open it up for questions if you have anything else that you'd like to look at.
On this back page, page 44, when it says dollar threshold used to distinguish between type A and B programs, what is that referring to? About 750,000.
Yeah, so when you guys receive federal money, they call them programs. Each program that you receive federal money for, like coronavirus money or ESSER money, comes through as a program. And they have type A programs, which are the largest, and the threshold for those are 750,000. Anything below that would be a type B program. And that information I use as the auditor to pick which programs I'm going to audit. I have to audit some of your A programs and some of your B programs. And so anything over 750 I've got to look at, and some things under 750 I have to look at.
Okay, thank you.
I will say our fund balance 3 years ago was like 150, so we've inched our way up there.
You are in an upward trend, and if you'd like to see it, you've done a good job. But a lot of people see the 2 million fund balance and they think, wow, that's a lot of money. But for a school that spends that monthly, it's not very much money at all. So.
Anybody else? Questions for Alicia or Ann? Thank you so much. Appreciate all your efforts.
You bet. If you don't mind, I'm going to head out.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Move forward to discussion items. And we'll start with a good news story. Oh, that was a good one there, I have to say. And Lisa, would you like to
Sure.
give us our latest update on some wins?
Yeah, so we've had a few things lately that we thought would be good to share. We recently received a grant at the middle school for our FCS teacher. She applied for it. She received a $5,000 grant through the Middleton Foundation. So that was a good one. And then our special services department has been able to bring in different donations to do different things. We've added a room up at Purple Sage for our new behavior program that's going on up there. And so Jen Jorgensen has brought in $7,200 between Ridley's, Corwin Ford, and then Peterson Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram of Nampa to help support that room and get it going. And then our social worker, Dana Ann Baird, has been able to bring in about $12,000 in different donations for schools as well. And then we also, in the special services department, brought in $1,000 for a wheelchair swing, and then another $500. So between Hunter Homes and Fleming Law and Emmett, they've brought in that amount of money for different things going on in our special services department. And then lastly, April Cheney at Heights shared with us this last week a list of different grants she's been able to secure. And so we've done about 25,000 worth of renovation books into that library. And so that's the most up-to-date number. So we thought all of those things would be good to share this month as those teachers were awarded those different grants.
A big thank you to everybody filling out that grant paperwork, getting in line, getting in the queue, follow-up questions. Those are all monies that aren't tax dollars, so it's a big win.
A lot of work.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. Next up to present, Mrs. Wolf, Dr. Croft on Middleton Middle School Academy discussion.
And while they're coming up or getting ready, if I can just share a little bit of a intro on this. Previously, the middle school, there has been a middle school academy. We haven't had it for several years now, and Mrs. Wold and Mr. Croft have been working on a proposal for looking forward on that. As you see an action item as approved to approve or deny the inclusion of the middle school grades in the Middleton Academy. We're just working through this right now. As you have questions and different things, there's no requirement to take any action tonight. If you as a group feel comfortable moving forward, we can move forward. But if you have additional questions, we can take additional time to work through that. So with that, I'll just turn the floor over to Mr. Croft and Mrs. Wold.
Great, thank you. I just want to start out, Kim keep doing a lot of the talking, but this all started when I just came up to Glenn a couple weeks ago and I said, hey Glenn, how would you like to make your job bigger and add 3 more grades to your school? And he said, yes, tell me what you're thinking. So from there, we put this plan together, and Glenn, I must say, has done an incredible job at what he's doing at the academy right now. And we see a real need at the middle school level with students who might need a different environment. We're not able to offer even all the strategies that we have. We can't reach them and offer what they really need. Glenn might possibly be able to do that. So Glenn put together this great plan and his experience, if you want to share.
And these are recommendations. I was sitting around thinking, how could I make my job more complicated? And this was one of ideas. So one of the great things about kind of at-risk programs in general is that the state already includes grades 6 through 8. So the funding mechanism is already there, and it is a larger percentage per child. For example, the high school, they figure FTE per teacher at 18.5 to 1 ratio. This is a 12 to 1. So it's 150 to the 100% funding. There's quite a bit. It's not a tiny bit. It's a larger mechanism for financing because they're trying to bring the class sizes down and add supports to help children that are deemed at risk. So I'll kind of go, I won't read this word for word. I believe all you guys have this too. I'll just kind of go over an overview of our brainstorms and some of the ideas, the recommendations that I have. Before, when they did the program, it was called the Phoenix program at one point. And they had a lot of integration between the middle school. They did a couple core classes with the Phoenix, and then they would do everything else, lunchtime and everything else with the general education group at the middle school. I think one of the problems that I have heard and kind of watched when I was a teacher at the academy at that time, and I was mentoring one of the teachers in that Phoenix middle school program, is that there's quite a bit of bullying that kind of comes from a student that they're separated over here, and then they try to go in the gen ed environment at lunchtime or electives or different things. So there was some struggle with kind of the identity of the students, of kind of which program are they in, and being referred to as the Phoenix kids or the Phoenix program versus looking at the individual needs of the child. So one of my recommendations is if we move forward and do a middle school program, I would have it be self-contained. I would have them do their core and to start out with, do the core and the electives all in the program. I would also treat it as a school and do a separate lunchtime. So a lot of times you're working through behavior modification. You're trying to change either academic behaviors, you're trying to change disruptive behaviors, And to do that, the more they're kind of in that model, elementary model, where they're with the teacher more during the day, more we can make greater progress than if it's kind of shotgun and scattered out all over the place. So that's one of my recommendations here. What does this need to move forward, in my opinion? I think you need 2 certified teachers. And one could basically, with 30 to 40 students moving from the gen ed to at-risk program, you could have, one teacher at least follow and then hire one is an idea we talked about. One behavioral intervention education assistant. That's someone who's primarily their BI, they're called, or safe school assistant, there's a lot of names. But it's someone there to work with the students. There's no use in creating a program like this if it's a rubber room. If you're just creating a program where you try to pack everyone into a room, don't support it. And so it's just kind of a place where the gen ed can be successful, but those classes, you don't have a lot of learning taking place. So in order to do this and have it be successful, you have to have a classroom where kids can go every day, have the rigor up, and they can learn. So you have to have a place to work with kids that are struggling with behaviors. And so that's part of having that academic assistant, intervention assistant, and behavior. You have to have a tutoring intervention. There's a lot of good names we put behind it, but really simply, it's helping kids that are struggling. A hallmark of at-risk youth is that often there's several grade levels behind in foundational reading, literacy skills, math skills, and they need a lot of support to kind of bring, and they can be brought up and caught up with the, with the averages of the other students, but they require a lot more structured support. A lot of times at-risk youth, there's trauma in the background of various kinds. One of the biggest ones is neglect, as well as different types of abuse. You're dealing with a child that needs a lot of one-on-one as well as small group intervention. We already have the facilities. The south end of Annex A is where we did it before. There's a door, there's a bathroom, it's a little self-contained. And the other thing, so far as working from Middleton Academy, is it's a breezeway away. So I guess logistically, the building structure makes a lot of sense. We would just follow the trimester schedule. We wouldn't necessarily start it on that date of the trimester, but when you pull the kids out, you would continue where they had essentially left off in their core subjects. So nobody, and when I say left off in their core subjects, remember again that a lot of these students are behind. So I think a lot of what you do in this environment is you get the kids into a room and you assess them, you figure out where their writing, reading, math skills are, and you formulate standards-based lesson plans around those knowledge gaps. So that's kind of the approach we would take and that I would recommend anybody to take when they're working with these youth. We would need health, and so I will show you a schedule, a concept of a schedule, or you can scroll down, take a look if you want to jump ahead. I was talking about starting this after the semester gives us, if you guys want to move forward, it would give us 2 months to hire a teacher, look at staffing, look at paraprofessionals, things like that. So you would have approximately 2 groups of 15 students. So 15 is kind of a good number. A lot of times in these kind of academy programs, attendance we struggle with quite a bit. And that's usually systemic going from kindergarten on. Your average daily attendance numbers are usually lower. So for example, I put 30 to 40 kids enrolled. You could enroll 40 kids, but really your average daily attendance is probably gonna be high 20s, low 30s. So you kind of have to plan around, we're only funded on our average daily attendance. So you have to plan around those numbers, which is, it's a little bit of a puzzle because you have these high rosters, but these low attendance. So you constantly have to kind of, you gotta be creative in how you schedule. But I kind of put an iteration, at least a sample schedule of how I would put that together, and I'll go over that in a second. I did include qualifications. These are set by the state. These aren't our qualifications necessarily. These are what the state says in order to receive this funding mechanism, they have to qualify under this structure. And basically how it works is it's 3 of, you have to have a minimum of 3 of section A or 1 of section B, or they could have multiple of both. But that's the bare minimum.
A lot of people listen to this on tape and they don't see, could you read section A and section B so people get a feel?
Absolutely.
Sometimes people think, we're in Middleton, oh, this is, I think, gives the depth to what you do at the academy, and I think just gives us some understanding of what we're dealing with.
No, actually, that'd be great. So section A, and this is, once again, they have to have at least 3 of these to qualify. That's the kind of the ironic thing, is they have to qualify to even be in a program. Not anybody can just walk into this program. They have to have repeated at least 1 grade, have absenteeism that is greater than 10% during the preceding semester. So having terrible attendance is kind of part of one of the qualifiers. As an overall grade point average that is less than 1.5 on a 4.0 scale prior to attending, has failed 1 or more academic subjects in the past year, is below proficient based on local criteria or standardized test or both, is 2 or more credits behind, and this is more for the high school, but is 2 or more credits per year behind the rate required to graduate or for grade promotion. Has attended 3 or more schools within the previous 2 years, not including dual enrollment. And that last one's interesting. I commonly have that one marked. There's a lot of transition a lot of times. We had a student that was out for the past semester with some health issues, stopped by the school today and didn't know half the student body. That's how much we transition students and how much they come and go, move back and forth between schools. And section B, and this is only 1 to qualify, has a documented or pattern of substance abuse, is pregnant or a parent, is emancipated youth, is a previous dropout, has serious personal, emotional, and medical issues, has a court or agency referral, demonstrates behavior that is I just messed up. Okay, there we go. Demonstrates behavior that is detrimental to their academic progress. That last one's kind of a gray area. It could fit under a lot of different scenarios.
So they have to have 3 of A and 1 of B, or?
No, 1 of B and you're automatically in. I mean, they're unqualified
Yeah.
for that funding mechanism. Because when we send the information to the state, we have to essentially certify that each student is qualified for that at-risk funding. So we actually have one of these sheets that we sign and fill out for every student, and I sign it, the counselor signs it.
And as a district, you can have additional criteria that you use for selecting students to be in attendance at an alternative school. And Mrs. Wolf will actually talk a little bit about some of that process as well.
So 2 classes of 15. So are we talking 10 per grade, or we just fill it up as needed? And is that enough?
I think that's a good starting point. I think you could you have the rooms there to grow it. I would say that you take 6th grade, take 7th grade, and kind of see where the students are. You're gonna have some that fit better with the 6th grade. The standards there's not a big difference in the learning targets between 6th and 7th grade, for example. I mean, they're a lot of times working on very similar, if not identical standards. And whereas a lot of our students aren't even there anyways, it becomes kind of a moot point. But my recommendation is kind of divide your 7th graders, the ones that are academically a little more proficient would go at the 8th, the others would go at the 6th, and you create 2 cohorts. Essentially, that would rotate between those 2 teachers throughout the day. So every 75 minutes or so, they would switch to the other one. One would do math and science, and one would do ELA and social studies. And so you go back and forth.
So has there been some research done or some connecting with the middle school currently to figure out how many youth would qualify possibly for this?
We have
Okay.
been working on that list and the criteria, and because we don't have some resources for some students who really need it. So that's kind of what brought this to fruition.
Okay, and then
Okay.
I guess my last one real quick from where we've gotten so far. How do you currently deal with the stigma both in school and at home oftentimes to say, hey, you're going to this special school to help everybody realize that this is a positive thing, that this is to take the education forward?
I think most of our students come into our program some version of kicking and screaming. They're not, a lot of times students aren't excited to go to academy. I mean, that's the reality. And you wrote the qualifying list.
Yeah.
It's usually because they've struggled in an area and they need that intervention. However, I would say that we have very few students that once they come on board and once they're part of our program and once they kind of feel that academic success and that greater help they get with those smaller numbers, they get some wins under their belt and they start to grow, and you can't send them back. You're like, hey, you want to go back to the high school? No, I don't go
So that was a question that I had
Yeah.
was, so I mean, we're talking sixth grade. Sixth grade, choose transition from elementary school. A lot of kids struggle in sixth grade. What is the goal to transition them back into the general? Or is it, I mean, if we start with 30 kids and they stay and we're just going to be getting more and more, I guess that's where I'm like, okay, financially and space wise, that's not really sustainable. Like in my mind, I feel like it needs to be, are we going to be able to transition them each semester? Like, okay, your credits are caught up, you're going back. Is it going to be fluid? Or really once they're there for middle school and they won't transition back until freshman year?
That's a great question. What do we do at the high school, for example, is I have a sheet that there's 2 categories that I check off. If they're caught up, if they're on where they need to be with credits or academically, and then behavior. So as long as they are where they need to be on those 2, I think a program like this always needs an off-ramp.
Mhm.
You always need to have students where it's fluid enough to transition between programs. And you do have some students that they needed that intervention, they needed that help, and they're able to, they're ready to return to the gen ed classroom. And like you absolutely have to have that as a fundamental part of any program, whether it's high school, middle school. I will say that a lot of our students that qualify, depending on what level, whether it's more severe, the kind of intervention they need, the ones that are more severe typically stay in a program like that. And just because it's the right place for them, I mean,
Right.
they need a lot more support. And some of those students, I kind of, you check that box, but you send them back, and a lot of those kids end up boomeranging back anyways, because they're not ready for that environment to go into a larger class with less support. What makes it successful is that smaller, there's no cracks kids fall through when you have 15 kids in a class and EAs that are tutoring and all these different mechanisms that support them. So, that's a consideration. I mean, I'd like to say that every kid gets on level, has a change, and so to be more successful, has better coping mechanisms, that all of them can be poured into gen ed. That'd be great. It doesn't necessarily happen like that, but that's a goal. I mean, absolutely, that should be a goal of any program.
If I could also add, as you're all very well aware, Dr. Croft and Mr. Rothop at the high school have been working really well together to create opportunities for students that in our alternative program that aren't traditionally part of an alternative program. Typically, it's you're in the alternative program, there's no contact with the high school. But there's a lot of, they've coordinated over the last several years to try and bolster that. And that makes that, it makes it easier for a transition back and forth. But it also, if this school is the best intervention for that student, they don't miss out on as much up at the high school because they're where they need to be for that intervention.
So I guess on middle school, how do they do like electives, or do they not get any? I mean, do they get music and stuff? Would they transition to the middle school in a general classroom to do PE are they?
I'll show you the concept. So this is my concept anyways. And we currently do this with high school kids. I have several high school kids that, academy kids that do electives at the high school. Over a dozen right now are. They have to provide their own transportation. The nice thing about the middle school program is they're already right there.
Yeah.
So for students, I would say you would have it as something, because it's trimesters, so 3 times a year, they're gonna get the opportunity to go into a general education elective. I think though you have to have the right kind of behavior in the classroom to justify those jumps. But once they show they're ready and they're making progress, and some will.
And you said that they will be given the opportunity when they are ready individually.
So I have this schedule where you can see the group A and B. Those are the 15 kids jumping back and forth during the day between the 2 teachers as they kind of switch off. At the end of the day, this follows right along with the middle school schedule. We have these elective workshops. This is the time, that 1:45 to 2:40 and the 2:45 to 3:45. That's 6th and 7th, make sure I say this right, that's 6th and 7th period at the middle school. So in the future, the students that could jump into as many as 2 electives, if they're ready for that, to have that kind of both world, see how they do in that, and if they're making great progress in that, then at some point you transition a student out completely and say they're ready. And I've seen it happen. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough. So this gives them opportunity to fit that middle school schedule. And I'd say most of the kids would be doing electives with one of their teachers. We also have a health requirement, so we have health and PE here because we don't want to take that away from any kids. But this also gives an opportunity to go to classes with the middle school and or still to get part of electives where the teacher does put workshops too. These are opportunities for, kind of coping mechanism, helping the kids through different things, life skills. I mean, there's a lot of great things you can teach that I think would benefit the students in a class like this if you get creative.
Mhm.
Sometimes just doing a fun workshop with the kids, that you're able to let them once again find some wins and taste some success and enjoy school.
And I think on one page that you have is, I don't know the last page. Mr. Gee had talked about the process for referral to the academies. Not only number one, they have to fit 3 criteria or 1 criteria of the A and B before, but this whole list is everything that we do at the middle school to help a student succeed. We might not go in that order, we might jump around, but we have all of these opportunities for a student to succeed. And if we've done all this and there's documentation, we make parent contact, I'd be talking to Dr. Croft, and we look at the list at that point, we would be making a referral. And we would establish what that process is going to be with both of us and the parents for communication. So,
A lot of it comes down to meeting with the parents
Mhm.
and sitting down eye to eye and telling them really what we're there for and why we want to do this or any other program is we want to see their child succeed. And then talk about ways that program, the details of how it can help them succeed. And kind of the justification of why you're asking for that kind of change. And some people that's all they need, and that, they're good after that. Some need more consideration and kind of thinking about it, but I mean, at the end of the day, parents want what's best for their kids. So, I mean, having that be something where it's a conversation and having a smooth transition, I think is really important.
So is there, just thinking on the staffing side of this, if most kids, just generally speaking, if we start the program with 30, but we only have, let's say, just 5 8th graders, and then we have the bulk of them are 6th and 7th graders, and they all stay in the program, that means next year, going into next year, you're only going to have 5 spots because that's what you have staff for.
Sure.
So would you say we should try and balance the numbers of the, I mean, like, they don't have to be perfect set in stone, but I'm just thinking what I would hate to see is we end up with 20 8th graders in there because they're behind and really need to get on track. And then, or 6th graders, and then they stay in the program and we have more kids, but there's not room for them. Or they all graduate, we don't have more that need that service, and then we have staff that don't have jobs. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, just trying to balance.
I think it's really also what we deal with at the academy right now.
Right. So how do you work through that? Like, how is the best way to kind of balance that staffing?
Well, in some years you have weird numbers. Like last year we had a ton of seniors. Now we have our largest class, for instance, at the high school is juniors.
Uh-huh.
We have a monster-sized junior class, and so some of that scheduling too. You have to be creative. But I will say there is no shortage of students that are coming up through and qualifying as at risk. Unfortunately, is that it's a sign of just opioid crisis, all these different things that have hit communities all over the United States. But we're seeing more and more students come up through. I mean, our numbers are, Academy's basically at capacity. Like, I bumped it up even a little bit because of the ADA. We have currently enrolled 154 students. And it'll even go higher after Christmas with the seniors coming over that need extra support. So, you do have to tweak classes. That some of these classes are going to be kind of fluid. And by that, I mean, you basically divide them into 2 groups. Students that are going to need more academic support and students that need less academic support. And so you can be creative in how, like, we mix at the high school, we're mixing sophomores and juniors in the classes together.
Yeah.
I mean,
That
the
makes sense.
standards
Some
difference
students,
between those 2
yeah,
grades is pretty minor. There's some research things that are different between those 2, but almost all the standards are basically the same between 10th and junior year. But once again, like, we're trying to take a step back when we do our evaluations of our students, where they're at. I mean, my average reader right now is 7.5 to 8th grade. So equivalent, like sometimes, you miss the forest for the trees. We're sitting there looking at, this standard 10th and 11th grade, and meanwhile, half my student body doesn't read anywhere approaching level comprehending, or
And are
they
you
don't have the basic literacy skills.
required to do the same state assessments that the average, that the general education population is doing?
Yeah, we do
On the
all the
same
same
state.
assessments, SAT, ISAT, all
Those kind of stuff they're doing?
Yeah, we follow that, exactly. I don't know if that answers the question or muddies the water more.
No, it does. I'm just trying to think, I guess, Lisa, as far as like hiring paras and EAs, isn't that one of the, we can't get any? Is that right? Are those the jobs we're having a really hard time filling?
Yes, but it will say yes, but then in the same week, Glenn had a couple applicants for a position he had open and he found one that fit the need he had.
Okay.
And so really, in any given week right now, it just depends on who's moving in. We're doing interviews for a different position tomorrow. So as we're doing those other interviews, we're looking to see if any of the applicants for that may not fit that job. Maybe they could fit some of these other positions we have open. So
Or
we
not,
just
if it's coming
continue
down.
to keep our eyes open and recruit as we can.
Okay. And then I guess, has there any been discussion about, this is I definitely think that there's kids that this is what they need, but obviously the numbers are much larger than what we could accommodate. I think all kids would excel better in a class of 15 people than 40.
Yeah.
Have we had any more discussion on how to maybe different approach to behavior issues in the middle school, or different, looking at the PBI system and seeing if there's other things as motivators besides just fight tickets, or other behavior interventions to help support this, so maybe we can decrease the need, or really focus on, okay, these ones really, really, truly do. These ones are having a bad semester. There's a lot of family stuff going on. We can work them through and keep them in the general.
You wouldn't want to recommend kids to this program that at a tier one intervention is things like the bikes tickets. It's things that are school-wide programs that teachers do in the classroom every day with their students, incentives, different things. That captures the most of the kids so far as norming behaviors or changing behavior. Most kids sixth graders are working harder to get the smiley face eraser or whatever. There's all these different elements that I think work great. What we deal with primarily in at-risk school is we're dealing with tier 2 and 3. In other words, these are the students that are not at a level where a teacher in their intervention style is going to hit and work with those kids. So they're going to need, tier 2 would be smaller groups where they're pulled out more. It could be, a behavior program where they're put on a behavior plan, like a BIP, and there's still a lot of students that have those that won't be part of a program. Usually you're taking, when I say 30 to 40, these are not kids that are necessarily that's a great question, have a rough week. These are kids that have probably had a rough couple of years, or are making it so difficult in the gen ed environment for the teacher to teach that you have to take more drastic measures. There's two sides really to this kind of program. There's a benefit to the student, of course, in smaller classes, but there's also a benefit to the general education environment.
It's not a
Because, I think we owe it to every student to move forward. And
Yes.
I think we owe it to every student to go into a class where they have the ability to learn. And they have the ability to let a teacher teach, get through the lesson. But some students have so much trauma in their past, and we call it trauma-informed classroom management. And a lot of our teachers go through specific training of how to deal with that kind of disruptive behavior. We have programs and interventions set up every day. I had several that we took through that today, for example, that I had to have out of the classroom. But we expect that. That's like our normal. So
Yeah.
we're in the normal. But I think we also owe it to the students in the general education class too, that they need a first-rate education, and so do our at-risk youth.
Yeah.
But it's hard to sometimes mix those when you have such explosive behaviors in the classroom that it's going to prevent a lot of times a teacher from just teaching, which hurts everybody. So that's
So knowing that our academy numbers are going to be super high, and are you comfortable overseeing this many and additional teachers? I don't doubt your ability, but I just want to make sure,
I asked him.
because we can't pay you anymore, so I
Question
don't
your sanity, but we don't doubt your ability.
I question my own self.
Well, the question I have too is, okay, so your goal is to start this January, right? So is there something in place? Obviously, we'd be hopeful that you can hire that one person within the next 2 months. Let's say it doesn't happen, okay?
Yeah.
Is there something in place that you have the ability to cover that? Let's say we approve this and start this in January and we don't have that person.
You would really depend on this this iteration of the program, and kind of what I'm presenting is following, I guess, the good case or the better case scenario that you have the personnel. And there's a lot of things out there. A lot of times when I get people for these programs, we're recruiting. So it's not, sometimes we just put the skyward applicant, pull out there and we're hoping for the best and see what comes in. Something like this, it would probably be more calling people I know at Boise State, or, who's coming through your program, do you have any Christmas graduates, those kinds of things, to see, talking to people in around the community and seeing what we can get into the classroom. And even with that being said, I already have a few options of people that I think might want to be part of this.
As a setback.
Yeah, it's kind of but to your point,
A Band-Aid.
I wouldn't do this way.
Well, no, I agree, but it's real.
It is, absolutely it is.
You put a lot of work and a lot of effort into this, and we go forward with it and put everybody on paper, right? And we get these kids that are gonna be coming in January, but if we can't fulfill it, well, we're kind of defeating the purpose.
Yeah.
So being able to have a backup plan would probably be a good idea as far as that goes for an interim, period of time.
And to talk that backup plan, if the board were to approve, some of the ways you can look at this is we might have to look at it and say, okay, what could we do with one teacher? And if we can do one teacher, that means we may have to take this list of students and prioritize, here are the ones that need it the most, and move those students in. And if it came down to it, and I think this is something we all have to be prepared for, is if it came down to it and we just didn't have the pieces, we wouldn't start the program, because we don't want to start a program that's not got the wheels that it needs to move forward.
I have zero interest in starting.
You don't want to sub every day?
And if that were the case, we wouldn't abandon the concept of it. It may just be that we create a different program to work with these students until the end of the year, and then in the fall we hit a different, when we maybe had a better personnel chance to get that person.
But currently, from your estimates, this program can be filled.
I believe so.
We have enough students to put in there, and it would help enough students.
And opportunities for growth. I think you could take this up 50, 60 students, because you have the classrooms there, you have the bathroom facilities there, you have the cafeteria right there. All those systems, things that you would need, you could go up to 50, 60, whatever you need, if you needed to expand it.
Are there that many? Should we be looking at
No.
future
we don't have
growth?
that many
Okay.
this time. That we
How does funding work if we switch them through? Like if we take a current 8th grade teacher and switch them over to the academy, the student funding, does it change? Like we've already gotten paid for them, but then we move into academy where he said the funding's different. How does that work?
Alicia, do you want to
Do you know?
attack that, or do you would like me to?
You can help me if I need to.
Go ahead, Alicia.
So basically, yes, we've already reported our staff, and we're salary-based apportionment is based off of that last Friday in September, who we currently have hired, right?
Uh-huh.
So if in fact that teacher is just transitioning in an assignment, we shouldn't lose any funding. They're still within the general fund. We should still be okay. The academy's in the general fund. So I don't anticipate any change with that one teacher.
Do we get change in the student funding though, because they go from at-risk versus, and is that like a back payment, or how, like, what does the funding look like for the student side?
Well, alternative high school is new to me, and alternative middle school will be
Really new?
But my understanding is we're actually funded on the hours that we can provide per student in the academy. And so I'm assuming that middle school is probably the same way, the amount of hours that we service those students. So taking them out of general ed, where we just get a half a day of attendance if they're there for half a day, or a full day attendance, probably I'm thinking 30 kids, it's probably gonna be a very minimal change.
Okay, so
And
it's,
that's just off the top of my head.
One way to think of it too is the average daily attendance, right? That number is gonna go up. Let's say we added 30.
Mhm.
that average daily attendance number is gonna go up by that 30, and either they calculate your year's ADA based upon what, the first Friday in November or the best 28 weeks.
Mhm.
So looking at the best 28 weeks, now we add 30 kids to the program, so then that rolls into our best 28 weeks for towards the remainder of the school.
Because they would bring that average
So
down.
that boosts, and then we're funded at a 12-to-1 ratio.
Okay,
So 150, just think of it like 150% versus 100%. I mean, it's 50% more essentially per child of funding.
And we've already reached out to the state to make sure that they understand kind of what we're proposing, and they have what we would need to be put in place to make sure that, because it was already there on the application, there just weren't students in there.
okay.
And so what we're changing with the state is the number of students in the 6, 7, 8 grade range. And they've given us the list of things that we would need to do to make that, so that what Alicia and Glenn both described would occur.
So I guess my question then is, since we're not changing actually numbers of students, like the FTEs, so we're gonna add another FTE for a certified teacher, even though we take one, and then add an EA and or 2 EAs, right? So we have the financial backing to add those additional FTEs, even though.
Well, and from January on, they would be at a different divisor. So that
That's what I was-
divisor.
Okay, so that's where the extra money will come to pay
Yes.
for.
And so when you add those additional students, the school then qualifies for additional
Like Title I or something. we would get
Title I
at
or
risk or
admin. I mean, there's a certain amount that comes for administration, for teaching. And so that's another piece of this that we'd be looking at to make sure that we're able to keep it as close to cost neutral as
So
possible.
one thing to look at too is, we're already a little below you look at it as like a whole program, 6 to 12.
Mhm.
That's one way you could look at it. And, we're not exactly at our maximum out point for the current high school academy. So all of it kind of goes into one program, and then you have that number that comes from that for ADA that you figure out, what your total enrollment and then your units from there. Because we have, our divisor is higher, is 12, then we have more per student, we have a higher unit. So yeah, that creates faster than the gen ed environment, EAs, behavior interventions, all because of go over that.
Okay.
Some of that would go under SPED as well.
Yeah.
Now the BI, for instance, behavior intervention, some of that could go under potentially some of those budgets. as
So the
well,
SPED budget.
What you're dealing with.
Okay, I definitely see a need, and I want to make sure that when we do it, it sounds like, I really want it to be sustainable, because it sounds like that need's not going to go away. So I just want to make sure that we can fund it. I don't want it to come down to our levy doesn't pass or something like that, and we're cutting positions again or cutting programs because we can't support it. So I just want to make sure that we've thought about all that.
It's almost worse. And I watched the last program, and I think Diana would agree from our conversations, to not have the supports it needs, it's really not worth doing. Is that if you can't support it right, and you can't have, allow teachers to teach and help the students in the way that they need it for academic and behavioral, then you're almost creating a bigger mess.
So for both of you, what's the cost for not doing this?
Well, that's a great question. Glenn spoke very well of the distraction and the disruptions in the classroom, in the general ed classroom, for students who are there to learn and teachers who are there to teach, and the constant struggle with these students who have no motivation, have so much trauma, they're not interested in what's happening, and so the environment is getting destroyed. So that's a huge cost. What are those kids losing? Our teachers, if we lose our teachers because they don't have their toolbox is empty. We have the greatest PD in the world, but our toolboxes and our staff, they're empty. And so that's a consequence of losing staff and losing teachers. Our kids being prepared to go to high school, they're not going to be ready. And so just off the top of my head, those are just really quick consequences.
Well, we do a brief, every student that comes into our school, we do a brief assessment with. It's very simple. Like, we just want to check, quick check on the reading comprehension, basic math skills. So every student that comes in 9 through 12, we've been getting a lot of seniors lately, and some juniors. And one of the things, as we do that writing sample, I have, one of our English teachers walk into my office and just close the door, and I'm like, that's not good. Puts down things like, I don't think this child can read. This is a 12th grader. It's made it through every level of our schools. And they don't, at that point, first things first, right? It's just, it's a student that's functionally illiterate. And where do they go? You can't really do skilled labor programs if you're functionally illiterate. You can't be a mechanic, those kind of, and so a lot of times these kids will go through menial jobs and they'll rotate for years through that, struggling to be a contributing member of a community. So that's a huge consequence for not kind of going full court press. What can we do early on to try to bridge some of those gaps and try to get them where they need to be? And sometimes you have to put away all the noise. Sometimes I go into a class and they're doing some lesson. I've used the example of Shakespeare, and I'm like, half this class does not read on level, let alone Elizabethan, the version of English. Can we put aside some of this and just focus on foundational skills? We really need, that doesn't mean there's not rigor. You're working hard with these kids, but you're trying to make up for lost ground. So having a catcher where you get these kids, so maybe by the time they go to high school, they've had 1 year, whatever, of intervention, really solid, good intervention. It can only be a good thing for their academic. And we're not going to hit even in hours of work, you're not going to get everybody, but it's a net that catches a lot more.
Anybody else?
I think you've done your homework. I like it. I
Kinda
can't help but not like it. I've subbed in an academy before. It's kind of a cool place to be. I think it is.
Well, it takes, I had our dean of students say that you have to be kind of a different cat to love that environment.
Mhm.
So, we talk in our meetings, we're all different cats.
Well, and they're
We're all different
kids,
cats.
they're
We
people,
love it.
and they need relationships. Some of them with that trauma just need a chance to know how to have a relationship with another human being. So I think it's really important.
Some have never had a win in the classroom.
Yes.
They
Yes.
struggled and they felt like they start to believe that I can't succeed. And
Yes.
that's one of the biggest things that we first have to take on with their students is finding a win, finding something where they feel that, hey, I can do this. Like I can take some steps forward.
Yes.
They start to, they ingratiate themselves with all these different, I can't do it, I'm not worth it, all these things. So
Well,
you're constantly fighting that.
social media doesn't help.
No, it doesn't.
Well, our goal is every child learning every day, right?
Yes.
And that's
That
the
fits
smart
right in
kids and the
there.
pain in the butt kids and everything else. I mean, that's everybody. And I think that's essential. And if we can, create a place that can give those kids a win, we're just as responsible for them. They're not worth any less to our community. So I think it's a great idea if we can get the logistics squared away. If there's kids struggling, let's go
I
after
like
them.
it.
One thing I did put on here that we can talk about, somebody had asked the question of, are you ready to take this on? I currently have a half-time dean of students. If you had 30 or 40 students in middle school, high needs kids, I'd recommend that half becomes a full.
Okay.
Because that program, they would always need somebody at either program. That was one of the problems with the previous program. You had one principal trying to do it between two very high needs groups. So having that flexibility to always have somebody on a campus and helping, I think would be essential.
Yes.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank
Thank you, I
you.
appreciate your time.
See, Glenn, would you mind
Oh, sure.
hitting the power on that?
Next up on our discussion are the survey updates.
Okay, I just wanted to give a quick update. I won't go into any results right now where it would be premature to share those out. But I did want to let everybody know that we did get the surveys out to electronically over the weekend. At this point, we've had 300 responses to our general survey. 168 to the academic survey, and 208 to our facilities surveys. And within those surveys, there's several areas where you're asking for additional suggestions, comments. Got about a third in each of those surveys of the respondents are offering up suggestions and comments throughout that. We are working through, we split that out today. We've got hard copies in all the schools so people can come in into the schools. We'll be working with Vicki Holbrook to get it into the paper, Idaho Press, either this week or next week, because we'll have this open until the 23rd of November. We've got flyers that are going to start going up tomorrow that'll have a QR code. It has with the QR code, it takes them right to the web page that has all the surveys on there. We'll be spreading these out in different places within the community. We'll get it in the paper.
The Gazette.
We'll get it in the Gazette. I just don't know if it'll.
Oh, because it's
The
monthly.
print
Got you.
time, I don't think
Got you.
will hit. And then I've reached out to several different organizations. I've reached out to the Parks and Rec, and they're helping spread. I'll be reaching out to the city of Middleton. They've said that they could help us spread that word. And then I haven't yet, but they had already volunteered their service to go through the Chamber of Commerce as well.
Okay.
So we'll be spreading that net as wide as we can. Right now, we're at about 10% return. If you're just talking, the majority of those that are responding are parents. And if you're just talking parents and with the 10% return, we really like to see that up in the 30-40% return range. So we'll be sending out reminders. Again, it's kind of the reason for they are a little, we split those into 3 surveys, but even with those 3 surveys, it takes just a little bit of time to go through those. So we want to make sure that we give people adequate time. Any concerns or questions on that process? We'll have, and then in December, we'll have those recommendations or the results here to share with the board. We'll also have recommendations from Alicia regarding the supplemental levy. If the board were to go for a supplemental levy, that was going to happen that was voted on in March, they would need to make the decision either in December or January to meet the deadlines, one of those 2 board meetings. And so we'll present the information to the board that we would, as far as our recommendations regarding that supplemental levy. And that could then be voted on in December as a board to go for the levy, or it could wait till January. Either one would work. Questions on any of that?
I did get a comment from someone in the community who said that they were extremely well written and wondered if the city could do something like that. So well done.
Okay. And we've actually received 2 or 3 comments just from people that do not have students in the schools that were appreciative that we were welcoming their input as well. I had a homeschool parent that homeschools their children, but they were happy. They wanted to participate in that survey. So
Good, which they should. They pay taxes. So
yep. So that was good. Next item is the required map adjustment to school board zones. And as we had talked previously, with the new census, there just has to be some balance between the zones to make sure that we're within that range. I just want to bring that up here really quick. 1 second. All right. I thought I had this right here. I'm sorry. I just wanted to report what the changes were because they're really pretty small, the changes that that we have to do based on where people moved in. We're gonna move to a different. You did receive, the board did receive the map though,
Yeah.
correct?
Powder River 2 moves out of 2 to 3.
I don't know the legal address
Right.
specifications. That hurts to think about that.
So there were four sections that needed to be moved. We moved one small section just on East Main from Zone 2 into Zone 5. And let's get that.
It's a Second Street down to Main Street. Second Street down to Main Street.
Do you mind reading through those while I find those numbers?
Then Powder River 2 moves out of Zone 2 into Zone
I'm gonna just
3.
email it to you. Do you have it up in your email? Okay, perfect. For those that are here, we'll project these zones up here on the board.
And these will be outdated again in like a year. with all the
Yeah.
growth and stuff.
Right.
And new Zone 2s. So effectively.
I showed Jake all that I stole from him. But it's mostly farmland, so it's fine.
I have lots of miles in mine.
Yeah, they go right up to each other.
Okay, here's where, from Zone 2 to Zone 5, as we get, oh, it's booty. It's gonna take a minute. We may move on to another one and then put the map up for the room. The change, and from Zone 2 to Zone 5, there were 341, and when I say 341, that's census numbers, so that's population in general. That's not just voting, that's not. So 341 moved from Zone 2 to Zone 5, 227 moved from Zone 2 to Zone 3. That's section over by Fox Avenue. 645 moved from Zone 3 to Zone 4 in one section, and that was a large section that is north of Purple Sage, up to
Hammond Road and the county line.
yeah, between that and county line. And then the last is just one small section from 137 from Zone 3 to Zone 4, which is down by Stone Lane.
It's freeze out, right, is the new line,
Yes, is the new
by
line.
the way.
So we'll have that. And if it's all right, I'll move on to the next item and then we'll have that up on the board.
And it's on the board packet too, you can see it.
Right. All right. I'll just move to item F. Lisa is going to talk about the continuous improvement plan. But I wanted to discuss have a discussion of food service and administrative compensations due to COVID. And so I'm gonna, and you have that at I'd like to talk food service first, and you have that at your place. There's a new salary schedule proposed for child nutrition. So if you look at what is proposed, that just down in the child nutrition section, and be sure to, that top line is all just substitutes. And that throws people off. Sometimes they look at that and they think that's what everybody's getting paid. So But what you see there with the starting wages up to the step 15 represents a 6% increase. The food service was already behind, and when we talked about classified staff improvements, we didn't address those at all. And we were waiting to make sure that our fund balance was appropriate to meet that criteria. And so as you look at that 6% increase across the board, that raises us up. We're getting closer, in those $10, $11, $12 an hour, even in the starting for some of those positions. And so if our proposal would be to adopt this, and this would be from this point on in the school year for food service workers. The total cost of this increase for the employees that would be in our district right now, between the cost of the salaries and the cost of benefits, would be $22,925.
Talking about how many?
What was that?
3 grand.
20, yeah.
No, between how many people?
Oh, how many, Alicia, how many food service do you have?
Question. There's a mix of full-time and part-time, and I want to say there's like 32, with 3 or 4 of them being like alternative subs that substitute between the schools.
Yeah. And so that amount, that amount compared to what we were at, as you heard in the audit, there is now a fund balance within the food and child nutrition. And so we felt comfortable being able to, because we pay for that out of the child nutrition funds.
Okay. So when he said in the audit that there was that 22,000 transfer for employee costs, is that admin, or what is that 22,000 general funds that we're paying?
I'm going to let
Sorry,
Alicia.
So the federal child nutrition program does not allow for that program because it's federally funded to pay the employer's portion of FICA costs. So FICA and Medicare.
Okay.
That was the true FICA and Medicare for last year, and I have to transfer it out of general into child.
So we don't get federal money for that. It comes out of the general fund.
That is correct.
Oh, and
That's federally funded. That's all federal guidelines.
Okay. So, but typically the goal of food service is that it's self-sustaining.
Yes.
And they generate enough money to pay
Correct.
for their salaries and benefits, including that FICA or not including that?
No, the FICA has to come
From general fund. Okay.
And it always has.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would be my recommendation for food service. For administrators, the administrators were able to make moves on their, in their steps, but some of them didn't have steps to move. And we did put a 3% increase in with that. But as we were talking about it with our other certified staff, we didn't include administrators in that when we were talking the additional payments for classified or for certified. And so using, and this would be much more focused on what they've still been the administrators have still been having to do to take care of COVID, tracking students, moving students, those kind of things. I would like to recommend that, similar to how we did with classified, where we would go 500 in December and 500 in May, that we do a similar thing with our admin and supervision, our supervisors. So that would include like our curriculum and development, janitorial supervisor, technology, all of those, $1,250 in December, and then again in May for those administrative. And those would come out of ESSER dollars, and those would be a one-time thing.
It's a stipend.
It would be a stipend. And I say that primarily just those administrators really have, this fall has just, it's not as crazy as last fall. It's just a different crazy. It's a different level of work that they've had to put in. And so that would be my recommendation to the board, is to make those stipends for the administrators. Any questions on that? Okay, if we can just jump back to our map there, just for the, those here in the audience. Can you zoom that in? If you can look, this is, and actually, if you'll scroll down to the bottom, we're gonna just go through these changes one by one. The little green section down there. And over, the one that's labeled A. Yep, right there.
You're doing great.
Okay, so if you can, and it's probably gonna be easier if
Clearly
I
don't play video games.
if I can slide behind you, I'll just point out, because that's not showing up very well on the screen.
Try not to make people say
The change that is moving from zone 2 to zone 5 is this little section right here.
Let me zoom in.
So this section right here is the change from zone 1 to, from zone 2 to zone 5. And then this section right up here is another small section coming from this red part. Yep. Just again, another very small section coming from zone 2 to zone 3. Thank you.
That's Powder River 2,
Yes.
1 and 2.
And what that allows, I mean, what we were looking for is just the smallest increments to make those changes that would, to balance out those zones. And if we can go up.
It's up high.
Yeah, that's this, okay, right there. Right there. So this section that was in zone 3 would now be in zone 5. And it extends up
To the county
edge
line.
of the district, yeah.
That wouldn't be zone
That's the
five.
county line.
That's not zone 5.
That's zone
Going from
4.
Zone 4.
It's going to zone 4.
Yeah, not
Oh, I'm
5.
sorry, yeah, you're right.
5 south.
5 is out, so from zone 3 to zone 4. And then this last little section right here, this freeze out here, Stone Lane here, this section would come over and come from zone 3 to zone 4. Any questions?
Actually, there's a whole new south going on.
And you're just trying to make it
Right
10%.
there.
We're just trying to make it so that all of them are within 10% of each other. Yep. Thank you, Lisa. And that just will, that is required that we do that. And so we've contracted with ISBA to help us work through that process. Questions on that one? Okay. Next, we're going to talk the continuous improvement plan. We just need to, this is the last year of our current continuous improvement plan. We'll be working through strategic planning, but I'll just turn this over to Lisa to walk through that piece.
So this is really just a continuation of our last strategic plan, which has been the last 5 years. And so this is what's required of the state yearly. We need to post this to the website. There's certain requirements in here that we have to fulfill. And so I'll just point out a few sections, and then if you guys have questions as we walk through it, just stop me and let me know. If you turn to page 4, I think one of the most powerful things that we do as a district when we're looking at the continuous improvement process and planning is really look at our clear and measurable targets. And so we set 2 goals yearly around student academic achievement. And so this year we sat down with principals, they talked to buildings, and the 2 goals we set were really to increase our English language arts by 3% and then our math goal by 6%. And that's looking at our historical data and then determining where we want to move from there and how we want to get to that point. And so we, once again, tomorrow, we'll talk with administrators and we've really narrowed that down to what number of actual students at each grade level does that mean for your building. And so it becomes very powerful because all of a sudden it becomes tangible and they can do something around that goal that all buildings have really bought into. So
And
that's
this is impacted, we just approved new math curriculum, correct?
that
was
was
been a
5 years
while.
ago.
I was
And
gonna
then-
say-
What was the one we just approved?
Science.
Science, okay.
Yep. And with the science, the reason we don't have a science goal written in is we've really been in this flux with the state, and COVID has been part of that, is the actual science assessment. We haven't got to a point where we receive scores back yet. And so we're still kind of in that variance of getting scores back. We should receive scores back this year, then we can start setting goals and moving on there.
Where, just real quick, where were we at in math this last year? Were we at the state? I mean, it seems like our scores were pretty good.
I thought we were above.
Go to page 6 for me. In there, you'll see our math scores and our ELA scores. We have 2 tables that we attach to this as well. And so there's a comparison here of where we were compared to the state, and then also where we were in previous years. And so really that's one of the main reasons when you look at our math is, yes, we outperformed the state last year, not as well as we had been prior to COVID. But we're still outperforming them. We really, when looking at that goal and wanting to set that goal, we want to get back to where we were in 18-19 and really close that gap. And so when we set that 6%, it's really to start closing that and getting back to where we were prior to COVID occurring and some of the learning loss that we've seen there. So
That's awesome.
and then when you look at the ELA, if you just turn the page, the charts there as well. Once again, we outperformed the state. We saw improvements from 18-19, which is the last year we received scores prior to last year's scores. But we really still want to see a 3% increase there. And so that would get us to that 61%. And so that's where we came up with that number there.
I just wanted to add something to keep in mind, that as we look at these targets, we're looking at targets that are also, the targets are moving as the students grow. And so when we talk about, there's a certain amount of energy and teaching that's going to have to go in for a student to make the regular growth that they would make from going from, say, 5th grade to 6th grade. Mm-hmm. And then you've also, so that is what's going on. That's the nuts and bolts of what's going on every day in class. And then to try and bring a student extra, you're actually bringing up. So that's one of the reasons you don't see 15-20% gains in any school district anywhere, because it takes a lot of extra to make those moves, because you're already expecting move because they're growing and there's a different expectation in a new grade level. And so as we're talking about these numbers, those teachers and those goals, they look like smaller numbers. And I know for you as a group, you understand this, but as a whole, we want to make sure the community is understanding that even though that's a 3% growth or a 6% growth, that represents a lot of energy being put in. And those students, when you're looking at proficiency, some students are just barely. So there's no guarantee that student is going to stay there. So there's going to have to be energy put into those students as well as these students that are below, trying to get them up above, so that we don't have people falling backwards while we're bringing other people up. So I just want to, that's something that as we talk with our principals, we're going to be trying to make sure that any chance we have an opportunity to share that and help people understand that we want to be able to do that.
Have they requested, or do we have any, like our learning loss money that we have specifically? Have they asked to use any of that? 6% that's an aggressive, that's awesome that they're willing to do that, because that's a pretty aggressive goal. So have they requested any extra resources or what are they implementing?
Well, I'll let Lisa speak to they haven't requested extra because we were putting together kind of a comprehensive plan. And so maybe hit the highlights of what we've.
So with learning loss specifically, we've aligned it all back to these goals as well. But we have after school programs for reading and math going on at every elementary school. We have it going on at the middle school. We have specific interventions going on at the high school where they're pulling students during specific times of day to work on math and reading. And so comprehensively across the board at all of our schools, including the academy as well, we have these different learning loss intervention programs that we tie back to reading and math and really working towards achieving these goals.
And are we using like the learning loss money to fund those, or is that programs we've always had, we've just funded differently, or versions of them, I guess?
There's versions of them. What we've been able to do with learning loss is add math. Right, so elementary, we've always had reading. We haven't had that math intervention for all grade levels, so we've been able to bring that into play. At the middle school, we have more specific academic targets than what we used to have with just the 21st century program, after school program. At the high school, we're able to really target different students and offer interventions there through stipends to teachers that we weren't able to offer before because we didn't have that learning loss funding to really offer that support with the teachers to do that and work during their preps and do some of those things to support these students.
Awesome. Cool. Can't wait to see it.
Any other questions or comments on CIP? Lisa, did you have anything else to share?
No, I think if you guys have questions, as you look through it, there's lots of data that they require us to attach to it. And then also our literacy budget is attached to the back of it. That's projected just off what's anticipated. That usually comes in a little bit higher, and we'll do a revision of that next year when we report back to the state. So.
Okay. We already discussed item F, so we'll move on to item G, which is a change to graduation ceremony date for the class of 2022. I'll let Lisa lead through why this is really, the request is a change to the calendar that you as a board had already approved.
So when you look at the original calendar, we had that listed on the 26th, which was also the last day of school and the Thursday right before Memorial Day weekend. And so it was requested by the administration at both schools, the academy and the high school, to do that joint graduation again, but move it to Wednesday, the 25th, so it's not on the same day as the last day of school for all students, just so personnel-wise, we're able to do that on campus like we were before and make that happen. And so in this, we've had lots of conversations with both administrations to ensure that we haven't had companies come in and do invitations and do all of that, and we have not done that. We've had them hold off on all of those, so communication is just now going to be sent out once we get this approval to the calendar, that it will be the 25th. If you choose to approve that.
Questions?
Vans?
Okay, vans, I'm just gonna review that. I put out requests to all of the Ford dealerships in the valley, and we received only one bid back. The bid that two of them one said that they would only do that through their fleet program, and Ford is not doing this through their fleet program. The other one said that they just couldn't meet that requirement for our request. And so the one that came in was below manufacturer's, the
Retail.
Suggested
retail.
MSRP.
Yeah.
Thank you. It came in below MSRP. MSRP was around 50,000. For a 15 passenger van, came in at 43,706 with the specifications that we had requested to be a part of that. The second was just for a 12 passenger, and I had just asked for both, but we were looking at the 15 passenger van. So that would be the 12 passenger was 42,345. And so it would just take a board action from you to authorize me to enter in, as that's the only bid that came through on those vans. Questions?
Are we looking at 1, 2, or 3?
3. The request I made was for 3.
And we have those funds, if I'm correct, as
That is
part of
correct.
the COVID, right?
Yep. Just as a reminder, because it helps us alleviate our transportation issues that have been.
I think it'd be great.
It gets our routes getting taken care of and kids being transported by the school rather than trying to get there themselves.
I think we decided the ROI on that would be
Yes.
very fast.
Yes, for sure.
A couple of years.
Yep.
Do we have to develop, or is there already developed like a driving class that they have to take, or how do you authorize, like, what do you?
We'll just steal that from the previous district that I worked in that has that.
We'll share that knowledge.
But we developed that in that district as it's basically a 6-hour class that includes driving the actual vehicles that, you don't have to go through a full CDL for it, but those vans drive differently than a regular car. So it's important that they have some experience and go through that. And then we will also get the GPS monitoring, which monitors the speed, harsh braking, and all of those other safety aspects.
So if we approve this, basically it's gonna be for next year. It'll be fall next year.
Well,
I mean,
it'll be 5 to 6 months.
I was gonna say, are they
So school's
available?
gonna be out.
Yeah, school will be out, but
So
we
it'll be,
starting
fall.
summer.
yeah, starting late summer.
Yep.
They can use them for summer, like
Yeah.
music, golf, or basketball, or whatever they have.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
summer.
Yep.
Cheerleading.
But it'll be-
But that was
Main school will be out.
everywhere that I looked,
They just can't get
that
them in.
5 to 6 months
Yeah,
was
they can't.
That's norm.
as
Right.
far as we could get, so closest we
I'd
could
say
get.
You would know, it's golf cart. probably, too.
So
Unless you can pull some strings, Derek, who do you know?
No,
I'm surprised. This come from Kendall?
yeah,
Maybe you need to
Yeah.
call
I know the owner, a couple others, but
Well,
I'm surprised.
well, we can talk after.
Yeah, I'm surprised that all three of them didn't.
Yeah, I talked with their fleet folks in both of them, and one of them's like, we want to, and we could for 2023, But for 2023, you'd be waiting till next
Yeah.
October to put an order in.
So, no, I'm with you.
Okay,
Policy review?
okay. Turn that over to Lisa.
So when you look at the first one, we highlighted in yellow specifically some of the changes that we're proposing to our current policy 900, which is the least use of district facilities. What we really took into consideration was the last time we talked and really trying to build in that ease for the community to really feel welcome into those and really essentially try to cut some of the red tape that we felt was maybe holding some things back. In doing that, we've also done some research, reached out to ISBA and looked at their revision policy as well. And so I think this is a good step in the right direction, but I think we would like to recommend that we take this to a third reading and allow us to continue to work through that process and look at that policy with ISBA as well, one of their newly revised one, and continue to really mold this into something that would be much more friendly and workable with where we are.
So if we move this forward to a third reading, would this stuff that's added in yellow take effect as of tonight, or nothing happens to it
Nothing
until
happens.
it's ready to the third reading? Okay.
Correct.
Which I feel like, I mean, they've had conversations. I feel like there's more conversations about facility use now. I mean, good than there was before, but I do like that it's very clear that they're available to Middleton community at no cost for education, civic, and other non-commercial uses consistent with public interest.
And another piece to that, just that we've got to make sure people recognize is our goal is to make it no cost for Middleton. There's just a few of those things that will require, just some minimal costs. When we have to have some of our staff members to do some technical aspect of that facility, like in our auditorium or anything else, we've just got to be able to recoup that. Other than that, and the groups that we've worked with are not pushing to not have those kind of things. They recognize that they don't want to have to learn how to run our soundboard or light board or anything like that. So,
Pass through.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that was all, we wouldn't be trying to make any money off of it, just cover the cost.
Title 9?
Are there any recommendations on this that you guys would like us to continue to work on moving forward, or are we,
I like it.
okay?
I think, yeah, just seeing what the ISBA recommends and make sure that we're compliant and that we make it as clear and concise. So if there's foreseeable issues that they've known, that we can just clear everything up and it's updated and meets, the legal ramifications of what we need to have in there. I think it's really good.
Thank you. So Title IX, we have both the policy, the procedure, and then also the student form in front of you. We feel really confident that we'd be ready to go ahead and approve this tonight if you guys feel confident with where these stand. We've made the adjustments from the last meeting. We've had an opportunity to really work through some of these processes, look through how it's gonna work, and we feel confident that we could move forward with where it stands tonight.
Any questions?
Good.
We'll move into possible action items then. I would consider or entertain a motion to approve the audit report or deny.
Move to approve the audit report for fiscal year 2021.
For a second,
Second.
any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 5-0. The next possible action would be to include the middle school in the academy program.
I make a motion that we approve the inclusion of middle school grades at the Middleton Academy, contingent on staffing or moving forward with appropriate staffing.
For a
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? I just want to thank you guys for presenting tonight. It's a lot of work's gone into that, so thank you.
No, thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries 5-0. Next one is about our new school board zones adjusting for the census.
I make a motion that we approve the new school board zones.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries 5-0. Next one is the CPI or CIP.
I make a motion that we approve the continuous improvement plan for 2021-2022.
Second,
I'll second.
any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries again, 5-0. Next one is about the compensation for food service and administrators that Mark presented.
I'll make a motion that we approve the additional compensation for the food service and administrators.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All right,
Aye, motion carries again, 5-0. Graduation date change?
Come on, you senior.
I move that we approve the change of graduation ceremony date for the class of 2022.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
all right.
Aye, motion carries 5-0. Next is the vans.
I'll make a motion that we approve for the purchase of 3 15-passenger vans.
Second.
Any more discussion?
If Derek does know and send a Kendall and the bid, we happen to get a bid that's different than what was presented tonight
We would just have to come back in December.
and just redo it.
Because they were under the $50,000 per unit, then we didn't have to do a formal bid process. Because it was an informal bid process, we would just need to go through that
Okay,
again. And
okay.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right,
Motion carries 5-0. The next, probably break these two apart.
Yep.
The readings.
I make a motion that we approve the second reading of the rental facility policy and bring it back with additional changes for a third reading.
There's a second.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
all
Aye.
right.
Aye, motion carries 5-0.
And then I also make a motion that we approve our Title IX procedures and waive the third reading.
Is there a second?
Second it.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye, motion carries 5-0. Do we have any visitors signed in? Seeing none, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you much.
Thank
Make
you.
sure you come bring our papers.
You guys don't mind.
Yeah, bring your stuff up and we'll sign them for you.
Way to come